I just made a great China deal today for energy, for the farmers. It'll be 40 to 50 billion dollars in farm purchases. I don't think our farmers can produce that much. I said, that's okay. You know, my people said, sir, could we make it 20? I said, no, make it 50. Our farmers will buy more land and they'll buy bigger tractors. Right?
The U.S. president there had one of his rallies upbeat after he and China called a halt to the trade war. Mr. Trump says it is just the first phase. This comes as some NBA teams are also making a controversial visit to China. And our David Culver is following both stories. David is live in Shenzhen, China. And David, let's start with the trade war. The president calling it good news for American farmers. What does it mean for China as well?
Calling it unbelievable, George, for the American farmers, and he's repeated that line over and over, including at that campaign-like rally that you saw in Louisiana from last night. He says this is substantial, and it includes $40 to $50 billion of agricultural purchases from China, mostly of soybeans and pork. So as to your question of what is China going to get out of this? Well, for one, making those purchases is crucial for them because they have had this pork shortage here for the past year or so because of the African swine fever that's decimated about a third of the pig supply. So this is something they desperately need. And they are going to be benefiting from a lack of increase in tariffs. So the tariffs were supposed to go up from 25 to 30% next week. President Trump saying he is halting that. Other parts of this deal that are interesting to point out, the president says they have reached an agreement on intellectual property. They have reached also an agreement on currency exchanges. You'll recall the U.S. has declared that China is a currency manipulator. Secretary of Treasury Steven Mnuchin has said that they will potentially rescind that declaration. All of this, Georgia, is still to be hammered out. And you make out the reference here where we are. We're at a stadium in Shenzhen for the Lakers-Nets game. They're not mutually exclusive stories. So the NBA and China crisis right now, we know that was sparked by a tweet related to the Hong Kong protests. The trade deal that was just reached, well, according to two sources, we know that President Trump promised President Xi over a phone call in June that he would not mention the Hong Kong protests, and it seems like he mostly lived by that going forward. Even yesterday in the Oval Office, he was asked by reporters about Hong Kong, and President Trump said that the situation has seemed to tone down in time we're in the midst of the 19th week of protests there, and he also says that he believes it will take care of itself, and then went on to praise President Xi Jinping here and said that everyone has come together for what is a big deal, substantial deal, and progress. China, for its part, praising this as well. The state media is touting this likewise as a great move, and of course, made sure to put in the quotes from President Trump praising President Xi Jinping. George?
All right, David Culver reporting on both stories, including Hong Kong and how it relates to your backdrop right now. David, thank you. And speaking of Hong Kong, a line of protesters has been on the move there marching. This is the 19th straight weekend that pro-democracy protesters have hit the streets. Some marchers are covering their faces. Keep in mind that is against the law after the city's leaders there announced an emergency measure that bans face masks last week. Other protests are planned, including a sit-in for the elderly and a demonstration at a shopping mall. It was quite a stunt, you could say, but the protester on top of this commercial jet got more than he bargained for. We'll explain